Welcome everybody to our, where are we in the year? March Audi Talk, the second one for the year. And today we're going to talk about how do we empower our managers to lead the employee experience. And the reason that we're talking about this is that, well, the first reason is because we are seeing it in the work that we do, that managers don't necessarily realize the importance that they play, the role that they play in the employee experience. And then also because of what we spoke about in our previous audit talk in February, where we said, how do we get the employee experience on the EXCO agenda rather than it just being an HR project? Because what we're seeing is if it's an HR project, then we've got a problem because, it can't. It has to sit everywhere in the organization, and everybody has to be involved, and everybody has to play a role in it. And the main themes that came up in the previous audit talk was culture, that culture plays a huge role. We talked a lot about things like psychological safety and do I have the guts, the right to speak up and to say when something is bothering me, and that has a lot to do with the culture. We said that obviously a lot of it comes down to leadership and their involvement and how they lead the employee experience. And then the conversation went to where do we experience our experience as an employee? And a lot of that experience is in that small unit where we work. So the focus went into the smallest unit of experience, which is the team that we work in. And then how important that manager or that team leader's role is in our employee experience. So that is what happened in the previous employee in the previous audit talk. And then a lot of the need to talk about the topic today also comes from the work that we are currently doing. So in Worldsview Academy, we've got a few different leadership development programs, and we are at the moment running programs in a few different industries. And the sizes of the organizations are from the smallest one is I don't know if you can still call them a startup. They've been in existence for 9 years, but they're still founder-led. The founders are still part of the executive team and the senior leaders. And they have grown from 2020, when we started working with them, they were 12 people, and they are now 65. So percentage growth is huge, but it's an organization of about 65 people, up to large organizations of 40,000 plus people. And in these leadership programs, we have a module that is about the leading of the employee experience. And then there's a few other modules like leading change and how to have those difficult conversations and what is my role in developing individuals and that kind of thing. And in this program, in the module that we talk about the employee experience and the team leader or the manager or the leader's role in the employee experience, we, at the start of the 4-hour workshop, we ask the delegates, so what defines a great employee? What do you think a great employee is? And then the answers are the typical, they've got a good work ethic and they want to be there, and they are people who want to learn, they are driven, they come with solutions, not problems, they put in extra effort. There's quite a lot about the right skill for the job. They've got the expertise that they need, the willingness to grow, the eagerness to know more. The role must be aligned to their talents, etc., etc. And then we have a little bit more theory, and then we ask them, so what defines a great employment experience or an employee experience before we go into the theory? And then the conversation goes around wanting to be there, I feel supported by my manager. I feel that my experience is valued. There's a clear development path. I'm clear on my role. It always starts at the recruitment stage. So a lot of people talk about when they started, how they recruitment or their first day. A lot of the time, their first day comes up. What happened on the first day? Did they arrive and the receptionist didn't know to expect them and nobody knew who to call and there wasn't a laptop yet and I didn't have an email address yet? Or did they arrive and they were welcomed and the one lady told us a story how she was flown to Cape Town and at the airport there was a BMW waiting for her and it took her to the and this is not the organization that we're working with. She then left this company. And she arrived at, it's one of the big financial institutions. She arrived there and the CEO was there to meet all the new recruits this day and it was exciting and she felt so important and there was gifts for them and there was a bit of an induction process and it was just the greatest experience of her life this first day. And then she got taken to her cubicle and she found out that she was employed to basically be a call center agent. And this is not what she applied for. And this is not what she was interviewed for. But she was placed at this desk and given this like overall, this is what you're going to do, and data capturing and call center agent. And she said she was out of there within a month. So that for me was an example of an employee experience that was amazing for the first, I don't know, 24 hours or 12 or maybe 6 hours. And then went straight downhill from there. So that took the conversation into maybe part of a great employee experience is absolute clarity on what would your job description be? What would that role entail once you get the job and once you start? And then there was a lot of talk about teams. How's it going in my team? Do I feel welcome in my team? Do I enjoy being part of the team? And then at the one workshop, I think it was two or 3 weeks ago, and that was the last newsletter that we sent, where the subject of the newsletter is that an AK in your hand? So this came up in one of these conversations where one of the delegates said, why is it that if we're in a team and one of my peers get promoted, we used to be able to, or we used to have lunch together and we used to have this WhatsApp group and talk about stuff and this was my colleague, not necessarily a friend that I go out with over weekends, but it was a work friend. And suddenly this person is promoted, and now this person isn't a nice person anymore. And the conversation kind of went on to say, yeah, but remember, it's difficult because now suddenly you have to manage your peers. You have to manage the people you were part of. And now they don't want to talk to you about everything anymore. So you might still be on the WhatsApp group, but they've actually started a new WhatsApp group without you. So you think you're still on the WhatsApp group, but actually you've been kicked off. And you're not necessarily having lunch with everybody anymore. And then one of the delegates said, but have you ever seen anybody with an AK in their hand that is about to use that AK with a smile on their face? And that comment floored me. It completely floored me. I was standing there thinking, oh, is that how you see your manager? And I asked that question, and a few people said no, and a few said kind of yes, especially when it comes to the performance conversation. And yes, and then in this workshop, we then go on to introduce a bit of theory around the employee experience, and then we start talking about the moments of truth. You know, those little moments that defines the employee experience that we don't necessarily always talk about, that we don't necessarily always plan for, the little moments. And then the delegates identify moments of truth within the employee life cycle. We talk about from welcoming me, the whole entire experience, up to the point of wishing me farewell. And there's interesting stuff that comes up in the wishing me farewell part as well, where the opinions are, once I've given my notice, it's almost like nobody really cares anymore. They don't really want me anymore. So even if we don't want to burn bridges, that last month is horrible because I feel like I'm just being pushed out on the one hand. And on the other hand, people were saying that the experience of other colleagues who's given their notice, who's resigned, kind of now stop pulling their weight because maybe there's a feeling of I don't have to anymore because they can't fire me. And the conversation was around, you know, with the younger generation, we don't stay in one job for long anymore. So how do we create kind of a revolving door culture where if people want to leave, it's okay that they leave. And if they were great employees while they were there, how do we get the wishing me farewell part of the employee life cycle done in such a way that these amazing people want to come back after whatever they've gone to do and got an experience somewhere else and maybe grew in their careers, that they might want to come back. Anyway, so then all of these conversations are in my head, and you know, you're in the moment, and sometimes you think, I actually want to stop at this one comment that came up and just focus on that for the rest of the day, but you can't. So I'm hoping that today we can work through some of them. And what I've been seeing is in a workshop like this, in a program like this, a lot of what happens with these team leaders and these managers and leaders is an awareness is created, an awareness that they might not have had before, that they are so close to that employee experience, that they have such a tremendous responsibility for creating a good employee experience and everything that comes with it. Like Robin, like you said when we were chatting before we started, that how important change is. And that's one of the modules where we take them through the change curve and just the realization that there will be all these emotions at the beginning and there will be a dip. And in that dip, the morale is low and productivity is low. And as a manager, your role is not to skip the curve and to talk away or wish away or deny the emotions and the feelings that happens when we go through the change curve. But as a manager, you need to embrace this and find a way to work with it so that you minimize the time at the bottom of the curve. And you get through that bottom of the curve into acceptance and accepting the new and celebrating successes in a healthy way. And what I've been seeing and what I've been learning is that we start with awareness. So much we start with awareness. So often I feel quite vulnerable in the session thinking, am I trying to almost teach these people something that they already know? And then 90% of the time I realize, no, they didn't know. Whether it's just that they've never had the space, the container to have this conversation, or it's just we get caught up in busyness and we're running and we're running and we're running and we're running and we're running, and the only thing that gets measured is deliverables and outcomes, and therefore that's what we get stuck into. Or is it this thing that we've been harping on about for the past few years? Your specialists and your technical experts that do really well in their job gets promoted into a role of manager, and suddenly this technical expert, this specialist, is a manager of people. And this manager of people thing is difficult. I think it's the most difficult thing in the world, If we think about the Drotter cycle, the kind of the picture is kind of one with these lines where first you manage yourself, and then you get promoted into a role where you manage others. And then up in that ladder, you get promoted to a manager of managers, and then it might become functional and etc. and bigger and global, etc. But that first shift from managing myself to managing other human beings is so often overlooked and is so often almost assumed, because you are great at your job, we're going to promote you, and a promotion means you're now managing people, you are now a team leader, and you're going to do much less of the stuff that you love, much less of your specialization area. You're going to manage people, and it becomes administrative and it becomes hard. And then we're almost setting these people up for failure because we didn't give them those tools, because we didn't take a pause or a breath to set them up with the tools that they need to manage people. Yeah, so my argument is, how do we enable and empower managers to be responsible for a great employee experience? It starts with awareness, because I think often they're not aware of the huge role that they play in the employee experience of the people who they work with directly on a daily basis and the people who look up to them. And the examples that they set, the walking the talk thing, how there are always all these eyes on them, that wants to look to them for answers. So I think I've set the scene for where all my questions come from. And my hope for today is that we're going to have great conversations about this, because I don't have the answers. Because even if the answer is awareness, then how do we get them this awareness? How do we get the right people in the organization aware that all team leaders and line managers needs this awareness and needs this training and needs these tools? Because then we can do it. Then we know how to do it. But how do we get to that point where we can start having access to these people, and instead of just rushing in and hoping that they hit the ground running and they do a good job of it, to actually step back and make sure that they will be successful and to set them up for success. So I'm going to start us off into breakaway groups. And I'm going to ask you to have the conversation about whatever came up for you in all these examples that I've just given, but to also think about, how do we get to this point of awareness? And if awareness for you is an easy step, what then? If awareness for you is the hard step, then how do we get to the awareness step? So think about what you'd like to discuss in your groups for a second while I set up these breakaway rooms, and then we're going to have the conversation for, I think, about 15 minutes, and then I'll bring everybody back into the main room, and then we get to share what your conversations were. Right, it looks like everybody is back. I'd love to know what your conversations were about. Let's get some feedback. Room 1 had Amisha, Dumisani, Mbali, and Sheldonette. What did you guys talk about?
Thanks, Liesl. This is Amisha speaking. We focus very much on how we navigate how leaders affect the employee experience. And we had very interesting discussions. And I'm just going to list a few points that we brought up. As leaders become more sensitized to their roles, the effect on the team can be influenced positively. That was one way. People leave leaders and not companies. So this is something that would be very interesting to explore. We thought that maybe introducing leadership codes or starting leadership seminars within the companies would sort of promote good leadership. Does the leader create or promote the culture or make the team feel heard and like they belong in that team? different experiences that were experienced by different people who are led by the same person. And partly that is due to the nature of the employee, but a big part of that is the nature of the leader.
Do you mean the personality of the leader?
Yes, as well as the skills that we promote within that leader.
Okay, thank you.
How we select our leaders. Leadership is not always something that comes naturally, and sometimes it needs to be cultivated. Sometimes we are attracted to different skills in a person when looking for a leader, and we need to cultivate the people management skills. Leadership should be adaptable and should be informed when dealing with every individual in their team. We spoke a little bit about calling on different types of leadership when dealing with different people. We had quite an in-depth discussion on different styles and how employees would sort of react to empathetic leaders, whereas autocratic leaders may give the teams a more sort of harsh, I don't know, help me out here, guys. Who was with me? Mbali, Dumisani. Yeah, the focus there was on empathetic leadership. And then the last point that we chatted about was how do we talent manage as leaders. Don't think I left anything out, guys.
Covered everything.
Thanks, Dumisani.
Thank you, Amisha. You've brought up about 4 new topics for new OD talks in your points.
I'm so looking forward to that.
Because some of these are like big topics on their own, you know. You said, how do we select our leaders? And that for me, what it brought up for me is sometimes in these leadership programs that we do, some leaders say, I don't actually want to manage people, you know, I don't, but it's the only way up in my career growth. The up, you know, and then that people wish that there was senior specialist roles rather that they could go for than to become a manager of people. So some people like straight up, no, they don't want to. And then this, you said leaders should be adaptable, their styles and stuff. In the session we did yesterday on leading in the 4th Industrial Revolution, at quite a big client, the situational leadership conversation came up as well. And it's one thing to know, you know, that there's different styles that works better in different contexts, but there's also, as you said, personalities, you know. For some of us, some styles comes naturally, and for some of us it's quite hard to adapt those styles, and it takes a lot of personal mastery work to be fully aware of what is my default style, and how can I incorporate those other styles into me as a leader, into my leadership style, and when to call on them and what that means. Yeah, thank you. Everybody else in that group good? Yeah. Okay, our second room had Jabulile, Lavine, and Mary. What did you guys talk about?
Okay, I thought maybe my partners in business will go, but it's fine. We sort of concur with what Amisha said, you know, especially in terms of when we identify leaders, it's important that they identify ahead of time and that the training or the development is progressive. Rather than when people have been appointed, then they're suddenly thrown into a deep end, including the development team, where they now need to figure out what training is appropriate and all of that. And definitely concur that it starts from how we identify talent and how we intentionally develop leaders. and obviously looking at succession planning and not look at a more very active approach. One other thing that came out from the conversation was one of our team just shared in terms of how it can be so demoralizing or it just creates such a negative impact when people that you used to be friends with or peers with, when you suddenly are appointed as a leader and you are ostracized or get left out, because you are now the leader, and at times they see you to be haven't taken their jobs because they were probably eyeing that position, even when a fair process took place. Then the other thing that we spoke about was psychological safety in terms of how do you create, flourishing and nurturing environments that create an employee experience that people look forward to going to work or working, because these days we work remotely as well. And how do people really show up? And that speaks to everything in how we interact and how we engage, from the person that cleans to the person that's a CEO in that organization, that we said that was important. However, holistically, we also looked at colleague customer experience to say it starts with the employee experience and how important that is. Because whatever garbage we put into our employees will be the result of how we perform as a company. And which speaks to how we recognize our colleagues, how we develop our colleagues or employees, and as a whole kind of conversation that needs to take place to create that wow experience for employees.
Yeah, Jabu, and that point that you brought up about how it can be demoralizing when you are promoted above your peers and suddenly they leave you out. And the other side of that conversation that I heard the other day is, why do they suddenly become not nice people once they're promoted? And in our 9 Conversations in Leadership program, we actually touch on some of the psychological the things that can come up for leaders is maybe this nervousness about, I've been promoted and you haven't, so now I'm feeling guilty, so now I'm not the leader that I probably would have been, because I'm constantly conscious and nervous about how you react to me and how how I'm perceived. Not easy. And then that play of the employee experience on the customer experience is such a big thing. And the other day, one of the conversations that came up was, if you, for example, work in a call center type of environment where the organization's service is not too great, and you are fielding unhappy customers the entire day, it doesn't matter how good your manager is, your experience as an employee is going to be horrible,
Yeah.
And how do those managers then keep the morale of the employees up so that the customer experience is a good one?
Yeah.
Not easy topics, eh?
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. Let's hear from room 3. We had Amy, Paul, Richard, and Robin in room 3.
Okay, also doesn't look like my group wants to talk, and Richard's not even making eye contact there. It was noticed, Richard. So we went into I just gave them, the team, just a quick summary of what you had said, Liesel. But a couple of items that came out of that was, how do we manage that leader, that shift from individual contributor to leading people, that first line leadership. And Pearl made an interesting thing. How do we manage that change management process of that whole situation for that particular person? I thought that was really, really interesting. We then also had quite a lot of, as a new person, as a new leader, what would help you, to navigate that whole change process and allow you to hit the ground running faster. And then we went into a long conversation about performance reviews, about how awful they are, and how, the AK-47, especially with the performance review, we've all got horror stories about performance review. We don't give tools to people necessarily to have these discussions. So, they learn from their crappy one that was done before, and it just gets inflicted on the next person. And then team, that was like my main points from our side that I noted. Pearl, Richard?
You did such a great job. I have nothing to add. Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Robin.
You guys are terrible. Thanks, team.
So, Robin, I want to ask, you said it was a long conversation about performance reviews and how horrible they can be. Elaborate on that a little bit, because in all the workshops that I facilitate, that comes up as one of the main contributors. How, sometimes it's they get a performance review at the end of 12 months, and then it's a surprise. And they're like, if you told me earlier that you're not happy with something that I'm doing, I could have improved. But then,
and I don't even remember that incident, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And look, the team has also come in here, but I shared at the beginning that I'm noticing and this is at management level in my organization, I have recently embarked on doing a training session, and it's literally it's like a flyby training session of how to do a career development and feedback conversation with your teams. And I've picked up that the leaders are actually not comfortable with doing this at all. Those that thought they were reasonably good at it actually were not very good. They realized they really weren't. And that's already at management level, okay? Then it morphed into a lot of what, we all have, you kind of do the monkey see, monkey do. So I have now been appointed, so I now rehash my experience of performance reviews, I rehash that because that was my role model. The next thing was very much about, like you just said, the lack of regular feedback. 12 months ago, I don't remember what I said that was so bad. I also made the comment about most organizations are moving away from the number. The bottom line is you all sit there waiting for whatever the number is. And then Richard made an interesting comment about how it is in Europe, about the bottom line is it's very much about, company, I am a product at the end of the day. What can you offer me, So it's a bit of a different spin, whereas in South Africa, it's just like a nail. Something else, and I didn't say this to the team earlier, but I also read something about performance appraisals should actually be housed under learning and development. Now, in our organization, it sits with our HR business partner, and that was an interesting, because performance, and it should be very closely linked to how are we going to get you to do better performance or higher performance. And that was something I'm grappling with, because in my organization, it's different. Team, I know, Richard, you had lots of comments. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I can gladly add. I think in general, and I'm obviously generalizing, performance appraisals are baited processes. The manager's not comfortable because he knows they're going to try and do everything to not give anything, and the employee's not. It's a baited process. Until that changes, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. And every person that's ever had a performance appraisal is going in with bad memories, because the vast majority of them people have experienced have not been good. So I think companies need to understand they're actually fighting a very hard battle here, because most people are not going to be on board with this. They've got to create a very transparent and real process that the employee feels, oh wait, this is actually real. I think I might get something out of this. Actually, the employee should be looking forward to that every year. It should be a highlight of their year. If you can get that right, then you're going to create a great experience, and it involves the whole employee experience to do that.
And to add to what you just said, Richard, is to create that trust around the process, because I don't think there's any trust.
No, I've never gone into
from all angles.
Yeah,
you know, you got to get your bell.
I've never gone into that process thinking I'm going to get anything. No. You always have a bitter taste in your mouth before you go in. It's just. But I think that can be changed, and it can be changed by making the process real. Making that whole entire process something that a employee actually looks forward to, because it's not just the means of saying, well, you didn't get this right, so this is your, you get a low score, whatever it is, however it's been calculated. Maybe it should involve wins as well. I always get the idea that it's like, yeah, you didn't hit that number, you dropped that ball, you didn't do that, so we're not giving you a bonus. Next. And what it needs to be is it needs to be, wow, you had a great year, you got that contract, you did this thing, we maybe didn't get that right or whatever, and if you walk away from that going, oh wow, that was a nice experience as an employee, then you can start creating better memories for future employees, so that they're going into that process without bad blood. Sorry, a bit of a mouthful. Sorry, my apologies.
This is an OD talk. We talk. It's okay, Richard.
I do have the ability to waffle occasionally when I'm given a free rein. So
I want to add something to what you said. Can that experience be a great experience every month or quarter instead of every year?
Yes.
You know, because that would already improve the experience, because you know we do it often, so I'm not expecting any surprises. There's a few things to look back on. I just quickly, Mbali, I see your hand. I just quickly want to check with Amisha, because she had her hand up and now I don't see her hand anymore. Amisha, did you want to add something?
Thanks, Liesl. I did want to add something, but Richard covered it in his sort of points towards the end there. I was thinking that it would be really nice for employees if your performance appraisal was less of an appraisal of what you've done already over the last period of the performance appraisal, and more about a progression path. You know, where can I improve, and what sort of comebacks, or where will my career move from here onwards? And it doesn't have to be into a new position or into leadership or higher management in any way, but depending on the individual skills and the goals of the person that you're doing a performance appraisal with. You could work together in developing skills within that person that they've identified as important to themselves.
And I hear that a lot in terms of the need that the younger leaders have to say they would love their managers to help them create a career path almost, because they might be part of a team where the team leader is there to stay. And for them, that means, how do I progress my career? What other options are there? How can I get promoted? If it's not into my team leader's role, then what other opportunities are there? And Robin, agreeing with what you were saying about how maybe it should sit under L&D instead of HR business partners, maybe it should be a joint effort, so that performance appraisals, performance feedback, performance conversations, whatever it is aligned with what are these opportunities, what training is available for me, what training should I get, what is happening in the L&D space that I don't know about, or then how can the L&D people then not know about these conversations of these hundreds and maybe thousands of people who are hungry to learn, but the two don't speak to each other. So maybe it's more like it should be an aligned, combined effort rather than either or. I don't know.
Can I throw in a thought that has never struck me before, but it is now, is a performance evaluation is always a very one-sided thing. It's the business looking at the person, and then at the end of it, something's decided. Maybe that needs to be a two-way thing. Maybe the part of that process needs to be the person, the employee, going, hi, but this business, this place is, I'm evaluating you, and you haven't done a great job this year. And maybe if it's a two-way thing, because that would be valuable for the business too. They can actually learn what their people really think. You can have an open process in that. And maybe that would make it feel a little more real, is that it goes both ways, as opposed to the business looking down from above and judging you, and then, banging the gavel down, and then, then you're giving your sentence. Sorry, I'm adding a lot of negative connotation to it, but yes.
Maybe rather than the yearly, if we're lucky, employee engagement or whatever survey, this happens more often because you're giving your experience as an employee more often. There are organizations who uses 360s in their performance appraisal, and that's great, because then at least it's not just one person, but like you said, is my voice heard? Maybe I rate myself in my 360, but what about I want to give this manager and that man and that, and I want to give all of this feedback, and all of that data is there. The organization that is focusing on employee experience, the data is there. So Willis Towers Watson calls it the listening strategy. What is your listening strategy? Where do you go for that? It's there. They probably want to tell you. They just don't know how, or they're scared to. Oh.
Liesel?
Yes, Larry.
Sorry, may I just add something? I think, I've been grappling with performance management for about 2+ decades. The problem is, and exactly, for about 10, 15 years ago, we also did a 360 in a company, which worked very well, because you get a balanced view of all the individuals, and it was, the only false area was that you had to really get a 360. It's peers, subordinates, and your manager. So you have to go all around and get information also from clients. The problem with performance management is, once you put that in and you have a conversation about the quality of the human side of the quality of the interaction, then it becomes difficult. And we have the wrong people in leadership positions to actually manage and discuss that. It's easier to go the formalistic process to say, reduce everything to a formula. You have to present a certain number of facts that you've done, and it will be weighed up, and then it will give you a performance rating. So there's little thinking behind it. It's more of a comply to this checklist and tick sheet that you need to comply. And then even to add to that is it goes into a review forum where there's a false distribution, and that is then forcing you, regardless of how well your 2 + 2 equals 3 has came up as a value that you've added. If it's not 2 + 2 is 4, then you suddenly put down in the bottom end of this. You've actually done the best in the group, but you just you didn't add up all the numbers that's supposed to be. And for different organizations, it's easier to do the little sums, than to have an honest development conversation and say, this is where you're going. So performance management has long ago already lost the crux of what it's all supposed to be. The only place that I've ever come across that worked well is they've split it up in 3. Basically 2, maybe 3 is one is that they get an annual CPIX related increase. That's fine. So that is it. And then they have a small part of the budget available, 1 or 2%, whatever per payroll or pay area. And that money is then made available to the line manager. But it depends on the maturity of that line manager then to say, okay, Liesl, you've done excellent well. Your pay is not supposed to be, or it's not where it's supposed to be. So we are going to give you something extra to up it, etc. So you get more of a quality level information of a recognition for what you do. And then there's the good side to that is the whole conversation, probably about 80-90% of the conversation goes about your development. So where can you do better, and where can I add to you and help you to actually do better in your job? And the mere fact that you're a good specialist does not imply that you are a good manager. And that is recognized and honored. So I've made the decision many years ago to say, from a special SME role to a manager role, to say, listen, this is not I'm not into this leadership politics. It's not for me. I've stepped out and back into an SME role, and I deal with the politics now from an SME perspective, which is nice. The people behavior, but I don't want to be involved as a victim of that process. It's just it's not me. So performance management has lost the gist, and there's a couple of companies and articles that if you browse, you'll see that they've actually waived it and cut it out of their process. They get a CPIX or CPIX increase, and then you can apply to the REMCOM for salary adjustments and special awards. And you get, if the company does well, you get a shared bonus, but you don't get a special, I think, a watered down, very punishing performance increase. Because I've never been in a performance discussion in 26 years that I can say I walked out there and say, wow, this was great. I feel encouraged. I want to stay with this place. Actually, I have to go into a whole mindful exercise for about 2 weeks before that to say I'm going to get into a right mindset. It's going to happen. I'm going to get beaten down. I'm going to have to pick myself up afterwards. Yeah. So the reality is performance management is outdated long ago. Thanks.
Yeah. We had the 2 OD talks towards the end of last year that Craig Yaitman led for us or hosted. And yeah, it's like the end or the result of that conversation was performance management is broken. So, how can we fix it? Because sometimes it's still needed. Like when you said, Lauren, some organizations have just stopped doing it, and I agree. But then there needs to be a development conversation then with somebody, with your line manager and somebody from L&D or something, to say, how can I be better? How because if it's just no performance conversation means I also don't get to talk about what are my development opportunities, then there's a big gap there. So Lawrence, you were also part of Room 5, and we haven't heard feedback from you guys. Is there anything you'd like to add that you discussed in your breakaway?
I've actually asked somebody to stand in for me because I've lost the sound for a while. But essentially, I think everything that was said up to now is pretty much repeated with us as well. It's about creating the human work environment that's warm and comfortable. It's expectations of leaders. It's specialists that's put into leadership positions. That's not very well thought through. And then definitely once people are moving on from leadership, from supervisor, typically supervisor positions to leadership positions, they dropped on the athletic track and expect to run Olympic times, and there's no coaching, there's no support, there's no support for the individual to actually grow. And then very important, I think what I've tried to say at the end was that many, well, not many, quite a handful of individuals that struggled with this, more senior people, we advised to go for counseling. On an individual counseling, we arranged with their agreement, they went with psychologists to explore their own demons and where it comes from and what's wrong. And I must say that helped a lot. Some of them actually turned around and realized, but just to follow these bad models, these bad role models, is just not what they want. And sadly, I think probably the bulk of them has left the organization in the meantime, because they just realized this culture is not for them. And then obviously the culture comes from your top leadership. And often I'm currently looking at helping a client and ask them a simple thing, despite and on top of all the beautiful things they say about people, I ask them a simple thing: what's your people philosophy? And they don't have one. They tell me what they want to do with people and how they're going to do it with people and how they're going to create the environment for people. But you can do that for idiots as well. You can, if you think people are idiots, you can do the same thing, but it's not going to gel. So people don't know how they think about people. So yeah, that's mostly I think what I've said, except please to the other people if they want to just add to, team members.
No, nothing to add from our side. Thanks, Lawrence.
Lawrence, you said
Yeah, I
people don't
think-
know how they think about people. I love that. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, if I may just
Yeah,
respond
no.
to that, I've asked I've asked a couple of my team members now who are also sitting in SME roles, and we probably have a session in 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time now on this, and say, how do you as an individual think about people? How do you just ponder for that for a moment and think where you sit? Don't answer me now, we can take it later on. But how do you think about people? Do you think people are inherently all good? Do you think people, you can bring out the people, what the best in people can only be brought out by you? I mean, what your and very few people has ever thought about it. And you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for representing us and for summarizing it in a good way. Thank you.
Lawrence, I think it's a very difficult question, because even when you said it, if you ask me, how do I think about people? My goodness, I work with people the whole day and I try and help people be better with people. But if you ask me how do I think about people, I'm going to have to really sit with that question.
Okay, then I've earned my money today.
Yeah.
You know, it comes up very strongly when I consider that question is myself, because it always the starting point of how you think about people is what's going on in your own head, I suppose. Anyway, it's a random thought.
Yeah, you're very, very accurate on this. Just to add a point is that I shared it in a group as well. One of my team members or team colleagues yesterday shared and say, companies that use the term employee versus companies that use the term associate. And I'm not a language expert, but if you go back and understand what employee means, it means something put to use. So it objectifies the individuals as objects that can be sold, that can be bought, that can depreciate, that you can hire and fire, that you can, we can put them to rest at the end of the day. But if you, therefore, often the conversation yesterday started about colleagues that left us in the last year. And I can remember how big the hoo-ha was about, tears and farewell, online farewell sessions and cards and everything. And then I asked the question, so 2 weeks before that, Mike, I had a couple of examples. How did you trash those people in the meeting for not doing this, not doing that, not doing that? Now you cry, now you give them accolades and you have a party around them. And now, but we love you so much. And it's a lot of BS. And then 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, that individual's position was filled. And then I ask, okay, so now You're all crying because this individual's left, but nobody keeps that individual on a network, or nobody keeps that individual as a part of the alumni because they were so great. So we objectified people in many companies to objects that we can wheel and deal with as we wish. And I think that is a huge accusation, a charge against senior leadership and the way our people work with people. That's bad. Richard, you're so right. How do you think about yourself? Are you an object or not? I'm not. I've got a heart, I've got a soul, I feel, I cry, I enjoy, I experience sorrow. So if you cannot accommodate that in the workplace, it's a wrong place for me to be. So yes, good thought. I think let's for everybody just to think about it for a couple of weeks. Thank you, Liesl.
One of the organizations that we work with doesn't talk about employee experience, they talk about colleague experience. And I thought that was quite nice as well. It's you know, they kind of made it their own and made it their own language. So something I've been hearing as well a bit in the work that we do, but also today is, and this is a question that we often ask in the workshop, is where do you learn to manage? Where do you learn to be a manager? And Robin's example was, you know, the way performance management is done to me might then be the way I do it going forward when I become a manager or whatever. And one of our delegates last year actually said to us in the workshop, well, I'm a mini-me version of my manager. That's what I'm a mini-me of my manager. And I was like, oh my goodness, you know, where do we learn to lead and manage? Where do we learn to have these performance conversations is for a lot of people from how is it happening to me? And if my manager uses these styles or does things this way, then I kind of become a replica of that. And that just makes it, again, so important that this setting the example, walking the talk thing is just such a huge, big responsibility on anybody's shoulders the minute that they step up into a senior role. Yes, Robin.
Sorry, Lisa, I just want to share something, and just to add to what you were saying, but I've got a friend, and in our coaching conversations with some of our delegates, we have this thing of, you know, you can either be a role model to someone or you can be a hideous warning of what not to do, because we actually go through this. Who are your role models? And you can pick up those key themes, and who are your hideous warnings? And it's obviously like a mirror image of either or, and there's certain value, often the values. So it's a really interesting discussion when you really get to know people asking those two questions. I just wanted to quickly add that to what you were saying.
And that language maybe lands it well as well. Do you want to be a role model or do you want to be a hideous warning? Oh my goodness. Strong.
Maybe, Liesl, if I need to jump off it off, but if I may just add, the role models also, again, back to your exco and your ex-CEOs, etc., the top leadership. I've experienced this where a very senior person with a very negative attitude, actually it's a malicious attitude, worked with individuals. And I know the individuals that was part of the team, and they were lovely people, young people, energetic, value-driven, etc. And within 6 months to a year working for that new individual, they've all adopted and assumed that role, that behavior. It's probably about 10 years later. I came across some of them not too long ago, probably 3 to 6 months ago. It's exactly the same behavior. They're not going to change because it was easy. 1 or 2 of them actually saw the warning and actually heeded that. But for the rest, they stay, and they're going to be bullies for the rest of their life. It's the importance of the role models that we work with. And I don't think, if companies will just realize the bad examples that some of the people set, and then they just tolerate that. What do they say? Culture is the sum of the worst behavior that you allow in a company, and we allow that, and dare to speak up to some of those people, then you're out of the organization. I can also testify firsthand to those that experience of standing up to people and say, but this is unacceptable. And it's tolerated, and that becomes your culture. So cracking the whip, stepping on people, making the billions of profit, but leaving 1,000 people behind you, trashed, hurt, killed, maimed, that's fine. But nobody wants to work with that individual. And that becomes the culture in the organization. And I think that's where we select the wrong people for leadership positions, and then the best people leave the organization. And that's a quote I got from somewhere. I don't know, credit to them.
A few years ago, we worked with a group and it's probably 7 or 8 years ago, but I'll remember this forever, because we asked for metaphors. What does leadership look like in your organization? And the metaphor that this one person came up with is that there's a bag of oranges, and then there's some big guy at the top sitting with one of those things that you squeeze orange juice out of, that sharp thing. And they just sit there and they slice the oranges, and then they squeeze. And then when it's done, they discard the skin and what's left. And for this person, in the metaphor, the employees were the oranges, and leadership were the ones making the orange juice. Yeah, and that was, for me, that was so powerful. And so wrong, but and so not sustainable, but so powerful that these people saw themselves as oranges to be squeezed. Every single drop that can come out of them will be squeezed out of them until there's only skin left, and they're useless and they get discarded and chucked on the side. Sure, we've run out of time. We have like 1.5 minutes left, and I don't feel that we have any answers. Dumisani, maybe you can end the session for us with a nice summary or some kind of an insight. Please go ahead. Dumi?
I just wanted to mention 2 things. I think one is, I think either it's you or somebody. I think for me, around the performance management, the critical thing around performance management is the traditional way it has been done. Hence, I like, actually, in most of the organizations that I've worked with now, people are talking about performance conversations, and performance conversations are ongoing. They are both informal, and they are both informal and formal. So it's that conversation, that engagement on a day-to-day basis, or at whatever point in time that you do it, because previously it has been seen like a carrot and a stick. And also the other thing is, when it's purely linked to negotiations about your increment, then it becomes an isolated thing. It's no longer being seen as a strategic imperative for an organization, because in order for you to achieve high productivity, you definitely need to have people who are performing. The second thing I just wanted to share with you guys is a book that I've been reading for quite some time now. Enjoy it and stuff like that. It says, the title of the book is The No Asshole Rule, which is building a civilized workplace and surviving one that isn't. Is by Robert Sutton. It's quite an interesting book, which basically talks about this, what one will call toxic leadership type of culture, and how do you then expose that within the organization and basically make sure that the organization doesn't associate itself with. And yeah, those are the 2 things I wanted just to share.
Did we just say the name of the book again? The
No Asshole Rule. Building a civilized workplace and surviving one that isn't.
Okay.
So they say that thing at the back, it says the No Asshole Rule is becoming a worldwide business phenomenon implemented in workplaces across the globe, including dozens of successful companies such as Google. Barclays' adherence to the rule, a zero tolerance policy to assholes, has proven to have astonishingly wide-reaching positive results.
Thank you, Dewey. I think in the 10, 11 years that I've known you, Demi, I've never heard you use the word asshole. But anyway.
It's the title of the book. I find it
know.
very difficult even to say it myself, but I said it this time, I just need to go bold and say it as is and not try to describe it, you know.
No. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I see Robin's put the name of the book in the chat if anybody wants to copy that. Thanks, everyone. We've really run out of time. It's 2 minutes past 10:30 now. Thank you for coming and joining, and thank you for a very stimulating conversation. And we will make sure that we continue this in other forums and or next month. So thank you, and hope to see you soon. Robin, did you want to say something? I see you unmuted.
No, I just wanted to say thank you very much. This was really great. The amount of questions that I have that clearly have no answer at this point in time. But thank you, everyone.
Or not a quick answer, you know, not a quick and simple answer. But that again just proves to me this world of OD. We are so needed. The world needs us. Organizations needs us, because who else worries about this stuff? You know. So thanks, everyone. I hope to see you again soon.